This is the weekend edition of Fear and Greed, daily business news for people who make their own decisions. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael.
Sean, our weekend show is all about the two of us, each nominating what we think is the biggest business story of the week, the most remarkable business story, the sleeper business story. Business kind of feels a little bit redundant now. I've said it so many times, but a sleeper story is kind of one that's flying under the radar a little bit. Maybe going to be a bigger story further down the track.
Having said that, quite often your stories have little to do with business.
Well, that's actually why I thought I better just drop business altogether from it, because otherwise it sets up unrealistic expectations of what I'm going to be offering. Of course, it's a very competitive environment and we needed an adjudicator. And every week our judge is our Fear and Greed colleague, Adam Lang. Adam, good morning.
Good morning, Michael, and good morning, Sean.
What are you expecting this morning, Adam?
Oh, bare knuckle fighting, in a verbal sense, of course. Spirited competition and only one winner. I'm deferring away from draws today.
Ooh, and are you expecting any melodrama, Adam?
That's a rhetorical question, isn't it?
Indeed it is.
Yes, I am, Michael.
Very quickly, would you like to just give us in, say, 20 seconds or less, your criteria?
Okay. It's like that Big Mac challenge where you've got to recite all the ingredients really quickly, right? So here I go. Melodrama, topicality, timeliness, economic impact, and my own subjective bias.
What is interesting there, Adam, is that you suddenly put melodrama number one. Until this week, it's always been 4 or 5.
It's been last.
Today, you came up with melodrama number 1. Michael?
Which
it augurs well.
If I'm honest, that's where it belongs. because with the right dose of melodrama, you can quite effectively disguise a lack of depth.
That's so confessional.
Sean, biggest story of the week. Would you like to go first?
Oh, thank you, Michael. I have no melodrama this week. I'm feeling, there's just so much serious stuff going on, including the fact we are a business podcast, Michael. Let's keep that in mind. Including the fact that the Reserve Bank board left the benchmark cash rate at 4.35%. However, the big news out of that was that it sharply revised upwards its inflation forecast, warning that the pace of price growth isn't falling as fast as hoped. The board expects that it will be some time before inflation is sustainably in the target range, sometime in the middle of next year or later. And the bank isn't ruling anything in or out. Now, for most of us folk with a mortgage or credit card debt or car loan or something like that, it means we'll keep paying these 12-year high interest rates for the foreseeable future. And economists reckon it will be for at least the rest of this year. I think that's really what we found out this week, is that for the rest of this year, rates aren't going to change. One thing to take away from the Reserve Bank board meeting was that the statement that came out with it wasn't quite as hawkish or downbeat on getting inflation under control as some has expected. It kind of kept to its neutral tone in the statement. Now, in the press conference afterwards, Governor Michelle Bullock was perhaps a little more downbeat, hawkish, however you want to put it. I mentioned at the beginning the inflation numbers. It's upped its CPI forecast to the end of June to 3.8%. That's quite a jump. It was 3.3%. The issue there is sticky services inflation, SSI, sticky services inflation. That isn't an acronym that anyone else has ever used, but I'm going to throw it in there. Things like rent, insurance, education, stuff like that, stuff that you've got to buy. It's really hard to get those prices down. Basically, the bottom line to all this is certainly the timing of any rate cut has been pushed out, but the consensus among economists is that the next move will be down, but not for a while. Big story this week. Michael.
I feel sorry for hawks. There's probably plenty of very gentle, peace-loving hawks out there just circling around paddocks looking for a mouse and things like this. Or maybe they're vegetarian. They don't even kill mice. I don't know. What about sharks? Shouldn't it be like...
Do you ever feel, Adam, that sometimes when there is a big story like the economy, Michael just sort of jumps in and tries to divert all semblance of sensibility?
Yeah, usually it's an airplane. Like, look, there's an airplane. But today he's gone with a hawk.
Yeah.
What about something that is really aggressive, like an eastern brown snake? So you could say that Governor Michelle Bullock like Governor Michelle Bullock was in the press conference afterwards was a little more Eastern brown snakeish. That feels like it's kind of got more
Uniquely Australian?
yes, yeah, or taipan. She was a bit more taipanish.
Okay.
That'll work.
But sorry, a taipan's more dangerous than the brown snake?
Well, the inland taipan, which is a variety of the of taipan, is in fact the deadliest snake in the world in terms of the number. Yeah, in terms of the potency of its venom and things. But it's less, perhaps you would say, less dangerous than, say, your Eastern brown, because they're actually confined to quite a small part of Australia, and they're quite shy. They don't come into contact with people that often, so therefore they're considered to be less dangerous, even though they are more deadly. There you go.
So the funding that goes into the health system because of the Eastern brown is far greater than the funding that goes into the health system. I'm just trying to bring it back to economics or business or something vaguely.
Well, you've done it.
I mean, this is all about the budget, Michael, I presume.
Well, in fact, Sean, you're right, because this is, and this might sound a little unorthodox, that I'm nominating my biggest story this week as something that hasn't actually happened yet. Right.
Are you sure, before you go on, Michael, are you sure this is the right category?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm not going to suggest that it's a sleeper story.
Okay.
But the fact is that the federal budget's happening in a couple of days' time. But the thing is with budgets, there is very little left unknown by the time Tuesday night rolls around. So really, it's kind of almost just a symbolic thing, the Tuesday budget. I think that we can actually almost lead the way on this and declare, we can break the news that the budget was in fact the biggest story of the week before it comes out. Because the week every day this week there has been more budget news, right? The week started with a major story on the indexation of HECS debt now being tied to either inflation or wages growth, whichever is lower. And that's big. That has a big economic impact because it's being backdated to last year. It's going to see $3.2 billion wiped from HECS debt. Massive. And Adam, I'm very glad that you're sitting down right now because we already know, we found out this week that the budget is going to contain meaningful tax reform. Think tax breaks. Think tax breaks for businesses in line with the Future Made in Australia strategy. Big story. Even if we don't have all the details yet, even the bare mention of tax reform is enough in your case to get the pulse racing. And there's plenty of other reform too. You've got significant funding of government services to address customer backlogs, modernise digital infrastructure, $90 million to train more apprentices, bunch of other measures to help deal with chronic housing shortages, more relief for the cost of living, including support for those who don't benefit from stage 3 tax cuts, think pensioners. Fixed income. There are concerns, obviously, as you'd expect, that any spending to help those who are struggling could potentially have an effect on inflation. Adam, the budget is huge. The budget is vast. The budget is mighty in its impact on business, on taxpayers, the broader public. So I'm sure that Treasurer Jim Chalmers, who is more likely than not to be a listener to this podcast.
On what basis?
I have no proof whatsoever of that. It just kind of feels like the kind of thing that he would listen to, in which case, Treasurer, I'm sorry you had to listen to all of that nonsense about taipans before, but I'm sure he'll be very pleased to learn that his budget is the biggest story of the week, even before he's handed it down. Adam.
Okay. Do you get the feeling we're in a build-up to an election, Michael?
I do.
3-year election term, 1 year to go till the election has to be held. Yeah, budget leaks, they're definitely happening. But in composite, while they're all really good stories, they're just not as big as the inflation forecast being revised upward. It's just the narrow victory to Sean on this one. He has to win. And God, I hope the RBA forecast is wrong. I hope inflation does come down more quickly.
So I didn't want to say anything, but I'm going to because you've made your pronouncement. Thank you. I just reckon that this is a really boring budget. So all that stuff, right, I just don't think they're going to do much. I mean, I know you listed a bunch of, $90 million things and a $750 billion. Yeah, very exciting stuff. But I actually don't think, in fact, I'm going, generous of me, you can do the budget next week, Michael, as the biggest story.
Oh, that's good.
It's yours.
Oh, it is so generous, Sean.
It's
Thank
so
you.
generous. So generous.
If it's really boring, perhaps I'll do it as my sleeper story. Yes. You know what happened this week, guys? The budget, but no one really cared.
Yeah, and Michael, the meaningful tax reform. Meaningful, the word is subjective, isn't it? So we'll see how meaningful it ends up being.
I still think I was ripped off to have lost just then, considering the two main features of your story, Sean, were that rates were on hold and they were maintaining a neutral tone, both of which kind of imply that very little actually happened. But
I reckon I was ripped off because I only won that narrowly.
yeah,
Because your story was about something that hasn't happened.
yeah, no, I'm actually quite amazed by that as well. I'd love to know just how narrow it was. Let's move on to most remarkable story, and I'm going to go first on this one.
Go for it.
This week, really, when you take a step back and look and just gaze upon the days leading up to this, like, God, I'm a wanker sometimes.
What I love is that we sit here and you start talking and Adam and I just sort of glance at each other and it's like, oh, he's off again. Let him go.
And for once, I joined with you in thinking. I gave voice to what you were both thinking. But this was a remarkable week for what I'm going to class just as a general overall and umbrella term of corporate rehabilitation.
Oh, God.
But in reality, it's just a way to combine two big stories into one and double my chances of winning. Optus got a new CEO, Stephen Rue, who's currently the head of NBN Co, jumping ship very slowly. If you picture him jumping ship from the NBN Co into the water and just slowly drifting his way over to Australia's number 2 telco, because he doesn't actually start until kind of later this year. But this change could be exactly what Optus needs. A very experienced player in the industry coming across to steady the ship. Got a very kind of nautical kind of theme today. After a disastrous 18 months, last year's massive Optus outage and the huge cyber attack the previous year that saw customers' data land on the dark web, it all did a massive amount of brand damage to Optus. And this week,
Can you say massive again?
massive.
Great word.
Yes. Is it the word itself, or is it the fact that it's impossible to say it without just going
massive? Yeah,
massive.
Anyway, I was interested in your story. Don't mind me that I just got hung up on one word.
Well, you should be interested because this week, Sean, week, Optus turned a corner, which is interesting if they were a ship because it's hard to kind of turn a corner in the ocean. But anyway, it turned a corner. Kelly Bayer Rosmarin's departure as CEO in November stopped the bleeding. God, this is a very mixed metaphor, isn't it?
The ship was leaking. I think they stopped the leaking.
It plugged the leaks. And now the telco can start rebuilding and repairing. And it's the same thing for the ships of the skies with Qantas. Oh, God. This week, I refer back to my earlier assessment of myself. This week, the national carrier reached a deal with the ACCC to pay a $120 million penalty over the sale of tickets on flights that had already been cancelled. In case you'd forgotten, it was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back last year, because camels are, of course, the ships of the desert. And then saw CEO Alan Joyce bow to quite a lot of pressure and step down early. That's now behind them. That is behind Qantas. I'm gesturing so wildly. I'm sending things all over the studio here. That is now behind Qantas, and new CEO Vanessa Hudson fronted investors this week and revealed that demand for premium economy and business and first class is stronger than ever. It sounds to me like Qantas might just have turned a corner this week as well. Optus and Qantas, the two most damaged brands in Australia last year, both taking massive steps to repair their image in the same week. That's remarkable.
That is massive.
It's massive.
Massive.
Yeah, huge.
Massive. My most remarkable story for the week. It's what's happening, finally, to consumer discretionary stocks. Like the name suggests, they represent discretionary spending. Think JB Hi-Fi, Baby Bunting, Super Retail Group. That's got Super Cheap Auto, one of your favourites, Michael, Rebel, etc. Nick Scali, Harvey Norman, Temple and Webster. Their share prices towards the end of the week had a very rough ride. This is the week where the economic reality of higher interest rates and cost of living expenses really caught up with share prices, or maybe Actually, maybe share prices caught up with the reality of the cost of living. The sell-off was triggered by bad news from retail darling JB Hi-Fi. It posted flat sales during the March quarter. Its share price tumbled nearly 5%. Super Retail, it gave a sales update, said turnover was off 1%. Its share price fell more than 5%. Baby Bunting was worst of all. It said sales are actually going backwards. Share price down 23%. Temple & Webster was down 18%. It's basically the same story across the sector. Families just don't have money after they pay for their insurance and housing and education, all that stuff, to spend on necessary items. The consumer discretionary stocks have hit a wall. Now, why this is really quite so remarkable in my mind is that they've actually done really well. Stocks like JB Hi-Fi, Harvey Norman, they're up about 20% over the past year. And it's only now that they've turned and they're going the other way. It probably shouldn't be a surprise because you'd expect that given the slowdown in the economy, but it hadn't happened until this week. And I just think watching the interplay, I suppose, between economics and the real world and what's happening with share prices, pretty remarkable, really. Wouldn't you agree, Adam?
I do agree. It is pretty remarkable. Michael, back to your Massive story. Do you remember the band Massive Attack?
Do I lose points if I?
You must. Massive Attack were surely.
So out of Bristol, England, wonderful songs, Protection. Anyway, as you kept saying Massive, I just kept hearing that music in the back of my head.
Oh, nice.
Well, that's what I was hoping for. Yeah,
totally.
And in terms of your just wonderful metaphor of the ship. So, Michael, is business the ship of humanity?
Well, no, a business is the ocean on which all of these individual ships are sailing.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Corporate rehabilitation, for me, has to win for Story of the Week this week. The reason is I think it's remarkable that Qantas has done this deal with the ACCC.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at the intrinsics of what they've done, not all customers really are making this work well, this system of repaying or reclaiming these Qantas flight credits. And Joe Aston wrote a ripping article in the Sydney Morning Herald this week about it. But the fact that they've managed to really build the brand while coming to an acceptable outcome with the ACCC and be seen to have done it well, I think is remarkable. And Optus' new CEO doesn't start, as you say, till November, Michael, but already the brand's better off for it. So I think it is the most remarkable story of the week. Well done.
Have you put your points in yet? Have you written?
Yes.
Yes? So you can't change them?
No.
Fair enough. Mine was dodgy as all hell.
Well,
that's just made up. That was dreadful.
Yeah, Sean, while Adam was going through his judgment, I think that is the first time you haven't looked as though you felt ripped off. It actually felt as though this is the first time you actually felt that you deserved to lose.
First time in nearly 4 years that I actually think the judge has done, when going against me, has done the right thing.
Unprecedented.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, but you know what this means? It means it's 1-1 heading into half-time. This is a competition. Unlike the last few weeks, which have definitely not been a competition because I've been beaten like, well, a drubbing, I think, each week. This week it is not. I'm heading to a victory. It's going to be glorious. We'll be back in a moment. All right, Sean, we are looking for a sleeper story. A sleeper story is, of course, one that's not getting the attention that perhaps you feel that it deserves or I feel it deserves, and that can be very subjective. What is it for you this week, Sean?
Well, it's really about what Adam thinks isn't getting the attention it deserves, not you or I.
Yep, that is fair.
And he being an economist, a CEO, a man who loves banks, no problems. I have this one. We have now had 3 of the big 4 banks provide half-year earnings, and Commonwealth Bank, the other one, provided third-quarter earnings. What's most notable is the big buybacks the banks are doing. National Australia Bank's doing a $1.5 billion buyback. Westpac's $1 billion. ANZ's $2 billion. A buyback is exactly what it sounds like. The company, in this case, the banks, they're actually buying back their own shares. It means there are fewer shares on issue. And assuming the profit doesn't change, it means earnings for every share, earnings per share, actually rises. So the idea is you buy your stuff back, you buy your stock back, and share prices rise. Good for shareholders. It also suggests that management and the board haven't found anything better to do with the money. So they've got, ANZ, $2 billion sitting there. What are we going to do with the $2 billion? Well, we could buy a business, grow our business, or we could get returned to shareholders. There's nothing wrong with a share buyback, but they're just not spending it on anything, on a new business, expanding an old business. To actually improve earnings in the future, you need to be spending your money on building your business, not necessarily giving it to shareholders. It might look good in the short term, a share buyback, but they actually do very little to grow a business. And this is where the sleeper part of the story comes in. If senior management and boards aren't sure where growth is going to come from within the banks, then how do we know where growth is going to come from? How can we judge that? And these companies are trading at multi-year highs in share price terms. So they're buying back their shares when they're at multi-year highs. I prefer them to actually buy back their shares at multi-year lows, to be honest. But the fact that they're doing it, it just worries me that there aren't any other options to grow the business. Methinks, and particularly given the banks are trading so high at the moment, methinks bank investors might be in for a bit of a rocky road over the coming year or so. Plenty of professional analysts reckon that the banks are overpriced. Obviously, we are not an investing podcast, so must go and make your own decision using a financial advisor. But I just reckon it's going to be a tough time for the banks over the next 12 months or so, and I think those share buybacks kind of prove the point. That was a bit worthy, wasn't it?
Very somber.
Did you say worthy or wordy? Well, probably both. Sorry, that was unkind. But Adam, I've got a ripper of a sleeper story this week.
Alrighty.
And it comes from one of your favourite commissions, the Productivity Commission.
Of course.
It is all about the My Health Record data portal. A very quick refresher. The My Health Record is a digital record of your health data, obviously, as it sounds. It's designed to allow patients to see kind of different doctors and specialists, etc., about a whole lot of different things, and your records kind of travel with you. Okay, I think, but the extraordinary thing about this is I think we've all seen instances of doctors still having to fax over records and the like to a specialist before an appointment, which just seems completely ridiculous. That I reckon doctors and medical centres are the only place actually still using faxes in 2024.
Yeah.
But
there's only a few buyers of that thermal roll paper still in existence.
yes. It's quite a niche market now, isn't it? Just medical clinics.
Yep. I think it's the smell they like.
Anyway, the fact is, the problem here is that the My Health Record system isn't being used. Well, certainly not to its full potential, because at the moment, and this data is ridiculous, at the moment, just 2% of documents in the system are being looked at by doctors. Records are incomplete. There's poor interoperability, and it's got poor usability.
There's poor what?
Sean, it feels like you're trying to draw attention to words that I sometimes struggle with. But I can say it again quite happily. There is poor interoperability.
Adam, can you say that word?
Interoperability.
Interoperability.
Yeah. And it's poor.
And it's poor.
It's actually quite poor. Yeah, the interoperability. Oh, there we go.
Ooh,
it's
hey.
poor. It's got poor usability as well. But the thing is, this is a $2 billion system. And it's the way of the future. As I said through the week on the show, one day we're going to look back on this in disbelief, because the way it is now with siloed information between different medical professions is positively prehistoric. So the sleeper story is that this massive opportunity, this chance to bring them...
Massive! It's back! It's back!
This massive opportunity, this chance to bring the medical records of Australians well into the 21st century is being missed. It's being neglected. And the Productivity Commission, thank God for the Productivity Commission, because their report this week has really trained a spotlight on that. So stand by for a push to get clinicians, oh dear Lord, there's another one, clinicians who are struggling with the interoperability of this system, get them using it, to get them storing patients' data on the system, to make it easier for them to use and to actually get them using it. This is live reform, a real-life productivity measure that'll make a massive difference. God, I use that word a lot, to the lives of everyday Australians, nobody's talking about it. But that's because we are all resigned to it being a clunky Stone Age process using fax machines. Here comes the future, and we can thank the Productivity Commission for getting us there. A great sleeper story.
Oh, my word, the melodrama. Just superb. So, data, systems, efficiency, customer service. Michael, it's like you're speaking my language.
I hope so. Does it translate into points?
Well, yes, it translates into points, but how many, right? So, Sean,
All.
Sean,
Ooh.
this is a really big one, this sleeper story, share buybacks.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder too, and the catalyst for me wondering about it was your newsletter on Wednesday, which was awesome. And the point around share buybacks, yes, they don't have any better option for growth than buying back their own shares, and they're trading at high values. But I also have to observe that no doubt some of the executives are on incentive plans, including shares. And it's also in their interest to boost the value of those shares when there are less of them.
Spoken like a former CEO.
Never did a share buyback.
All right. But you wish you had.
If only. But, so to me, that is a really big sleeper story. Michael, just by a whisker gets you on melodrama. So Michael wins sleeper story of the week.
Sorry, no, on melodrama, he gets me by 1,000 whiskers. On story, absolutely not. But you are the judge. I will give that to you.
And as Adam said at the start, melodrama was the prime criteria.
That's right. The My Health thing, though, what you've just said, like we've known that so points are in. I get that. Why don't the medical profession just use the friggin' thing? Like,
amen.
I find it frustrating because nothing happened this week of any difference whatsoever. It's just, this has been going on for months and years, and everyone complains about it, but nothing happens.
Federation of States, Sean. That's where I put it.
And once again, Adam uses this show to push his own little agenda. I love that. So does that mean then, is that 2-1 my way?
Yes, Michael.
I'm going to go for my favourite story because I think this is a cracking story.
Oh, yeah, please.
Righto. AVZ Minerals.
Oh,
My favourite story for all the wrong reasons. You need to know the history of this one. It's a lithium explorer, and shareholders now face one of the biggest wealth wipeouts in history, well, at least ASX history, after management said it will delist from the ASX on Monday coming, 9 days' time. The Perth-based explorer has more than 21,000 shareholders, paper wealth of $2.8 billion tied up in shares that last traded on the ASX in May 2022. Now, AVZ Minerals is in dispute over ownership rights to potentially the world's largest lithium deposit called Monono, M-A-N-O-N-O, Monono, in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The board has now said it will not seek to be reinstated on the ASX, blaming the prospective delisting on the Congolese government's failure to comply with court orders, a bunch of other battles it's got with Chinese and Congolese mining rivals for control of this Monono tenement in Congo Southwest. That's all the background. What's really interesting, so AVZ's market valuation hit $4.6 billion in April 2022 when it came out and said that it's likely to secure the license to mine the Monono deposit. Now, this Monono deposit is massive. A month later, AVZ said, we're actually going to have to go into a massive.
so,
there you go.
Yeah, it did not have enough melodrama behind it, Sean. You got to really take it from your diaphragm. Massive.
Massive. Right.
There we go.
The next month, the Explorer entered a trading halt after it said to investors that it faced a legal dispute with Chinese and Congolese rivals over it. Hasn't traded since. It's very possible there's no value left in the company now because it's facing all sorts of legal action all over the place. It's got $4.2 million cash in hand. That'll go on those legal disputes. So $2.8 billion is its worth, but a month prior to that, $4.6 billion. And that basically has gone, and all the shareholders will get nothing back, or it's highly unlikely that they will get anything back. I just think, like, everything wrong with that. Basically, a mining yarn. It's about working with sovereign risk, so working in Africa where the rule of law isn't probably as sturdy as it might be in Australia. The fact that shareholders were told something and suddenly 4 weeks later they were told something else, they lost a massive amount of money, lack of communication with shareholders, the loss of value, just a really great yarn about a business. Not much melodrama, but I think the fact that the story itself is such an incredible story does it. Boys, say something, please.
I like that theory. Yeah.
What is it kind of favourite yarn of the week rather than a positive favourite? It is definitely a big story.
Yeah, in fact, HIH I think was probably
biggest
that's
collapse.
Insurance crowd.
Mm.
Yeah, but this one, if you take it as, because some people got money back in that, but I think it was worth it was over $5 billion in total, but there was money that went back. This is $4.6 billion from the April 22 moment, so this could be even bigger than HIH. Incredible story. Michael.
Yeah, I think that is a great story, and I wasn't going to interrupt with any kind of criticism because I thought it was excellent. There we
Excellent. Good.
See, that's how I am when I'm leading, going into the final round. I'm very generous of spirit. Good sport. Favorite story. It takes a lot for me not to choose an airline story or a space story. And this week we actually had the potential for any of these ones, because we had Qantas, we had Bonza, we had a new planet that's too far away and actually too hot to actually be of any use to us. All good options for my favorite story. Instead, I've gone for this one because it actually affects everyone in every workplace around Australia. There is new research from the Australian HR Institute that shows that 57% of employers believe the skills gap is harming organisations. Now, that's pretty alarming. But this next stat is the one that will shock you to your very core without kind of overstating this. According to this research, from a survey of more than 600 senior HR professionals and business leaders, almost 20% of workers are not proficient in their role. And that caused me to ponder, naturally, about fear and greed. So, little process of elimination here. We've got our producer, Luke, who is brilliant at his job.
Very skilled.
Absolutely.
So it's not him.
No.
Stephen Koukoulis, our resident economist, who's on the week ahead every Monday.
Absolute proficiency.
He is more than proficient. So that's 40% of the fear and greed team, and that just leaves the three of us. This process of elimination, the 1 in 5.
Who gets the short straw?
The 1 in 5 has to be one of us sitting here in the studio, and I hate to say it.
To the judge.
No, stand by, Adam. As the only person of the three of us who knew very little about kind of, well, arguably business, when we started a business podcast, I'm a little worried that it could be me. Because listen to my reasoning here.
Hold on. Don't go be nice to the judge. Go on.
What? Stand by. We've got you, Sean, the business journalist. You've been covering business since before business was even invented. And then over here we've got Adam, the former CEO of an ASX listed company. You've been swimming around in the business world for eons, right? Then we've got the man of the people, the everyday Joe, who just found himself here, who woke up in a team of brilliant co-workers and wonders every day how he got here. So I'm going to take one for the team today and say that if one of us has to be the 20% who's not proficient, I would rather it be me, the Honourable Michael Thompson, throwing himself on this grenade, who's definitely not doing it so that he gets the win out of pity. But if he does get the win out of pity, he will accept it and accept a 3-1 victory.
Okay. Just a question on that report, Michael. The people from the Australian HR Institute saying that the drop in skills has happened and 20% of workers are not proficient. Do they include themselves in that 20%? Well, that's a rhetorical question, obviously.
Well, in that case, I shan't answer it.
No, do go ahead. Don't let that stop you.
No, please go on.
Sean's story, a quick use of the old calculator that I still have from university days. That $4.6 billion across 21,000 shareholders. That's over 200 grand each that they've lost
I meant to say that.
because there's not an applicable rule of law. It's a staggering amount of money and just how disappointing it is. Imagine for those people working on it. So it's not a positive story, but it has to be the favourite yarn of the week for me.
So you're saying there's no pity point for me here, Adam?
No, look, Michael, you gave it everything on melodrama.
I sure did. There is nothing that I'm a shriveled husk of a human right now, Adam. I've given it everything I've got.
Yeah, so that's 2-2 on the story count today.
Points, Adam, points.
Oh, here we go.
Michael, 92 points.
Yeah.
Sean, 93 points.
That does make me laugh.
I wish I had a scheme in mind, but this is just how the scores flow.
It's the too much melodrama, Michael. That last story, too much melodrama. I reckon that's where you lost it.
Well, it was only 600 people and it was an HR Institute report. So I just don't see it as that big or for favourite yarn of the week.
Yeah, fair enough. Well judged. Michael, snap out of it.
Okay, sorry, I'm fine. I really thought I had it this week, Sean. I really thought it was mine.
You did.
But you know what? I look forward to using the budget next week to secure a fabulous victory.
Let's see if there's anything in it.
Yeah, thank you very much, Adam.
Thank you, Michael.
And thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
Well, there we go, the gracious winner. Make sure you're following the podcast and please join us online on LinkedIn, Instagram, X, TikTok and Facebook. I'm Michael Thompson and that was Fear and Greed. Have a great weekend.